Thank you very much. So what I would like to do in the next, I don't know, 25 minutes or so is to briefly, say a couple of words on the background of the year of polar prediction, and then address a little bit the accomplishments so far. And, I can't be complete, obviously, in this 25-minute slot. So I decided to cut a little bit in the vertical, acknowledging, though, that, probably in terms of accomplishment, my presentation won't be complete. Now, when it comes to the background, the motivation for this, in my view, still this iconic time series, the time series of September mean Arctic sea ice extent here from satellite data is sort of really telling the story of, why PPP came into place. And, if you look at the first few years, sort of the, from the 1970s to the early 2000s, the old world, if you will, not much has happened really still with the extent in the Arctic, and there was little stakeholder activity. I think it's really fair to say that traditional knowledge worked for the people in decision making, so their knowledge on weather and climate, and because of not much was going on, there was also hardly any interest in possible Arctic mid-latitude linkages. But with these sort of massive drops in extent in the late 2000s, that really changed, and that's the new world, if you will, with this record low Arctic sea ice extent, where there was increasing interest by stakeholders. I think this radical change in the weather and climate also led to the fact that this traditional knowledge on weather and climate is challenged in these rapidly changing areas, and with the rapid changes going on in the Arctic, the strong interest in Arctic mid-latitude linkages emerged. Now, the Polar Prediction Project, we have seen this many times, the mission statement, and that was worked out at this Geneva meeting in 2011. It was really about promoting cooperative research. It put polar prediction into the focus. We went coupled, and we considered timescales from hourly to seasonal. And in principle, the scope when we started, was wide. And we clearly needed to find a sort of a focus, And one of the foci was, to put really a strong emphasis on sea ice, but the other focus was also sort of in time, and that turned out to be turned into the year of polar prediction. So, whose definition we have heard already many times. So it is sort of an intensive period of observing, modeling, verification, and so forth. And I think it's fair to say by now, the year of polar prediction is probably more famous and well known than the Polar Prediction Project, and that's perfectly fine, I guess. What we also didn't do, and I can't remember really whether we did it on purpose, but we didn't put any timescales in this mission statement anymore. And I think this really helped opening the year of polar prediction also for the climate community. So I think this was very, very useful. Now, when it comes to the accomplishments, I mean, you have seen all those, being in Montreal currently, you have seen the booklet, This is also for those following us online. It's also available on the YOPP Final Summit webpage, as a PDF. And, this provides a summary of what we think are, up to today, the achievements and impacts. And, I would like to focus on a few of those. Now, there's this nice graphic, probably the details of which you can't read here right now. That's what we call accomplishments at a glance, And then you see sort of the first years, and you zoom in a little bit, you see sort of more like planning meetings, implementation plans, and so forth. And sort of towards the later period, it was really sort of about science, special issues coming out, special observing periods, and, probably much more of the stuff you'll be hearing in the next couple of days. But I think, these things like planning, community building, and so forth, I think they were absolutely critical. And in that regard, of the many events, certainly this one event that stood out was the YOPP Summit that was held at WMO in Geneva in 2015. And I guess sort of one of the signs for me personally that really told me, I mean, YOPP is probably going to fly, was when we invited the Scandinavians, and all of them accepted our invitation, despite the fact it was in the middle of their sacred summer holiday season. I think then, we knew we were onto something. There were also some other nice developments at that summit. I mean, Met Norway, stood up and offered to host the data portal. I think David Bromwich realized there's lots of interest in the Southern Hemisphere as well. So YOPP Southern Hemisphere was started. And I think last but not least, I think the stakeholder, the users, gave us the go ahead. I think they were thinking, what we are planning to do was useful and important to them. Now, coordination was also very important, and it was not just about, coordinating our own thing, but it was also about aligning with other related initiatives. And in that regard, this fourth meeting we had in Boulder was actually quite important, because for the first time, Matt Shoup appeared, in the polar prediction theme. And back then, he was building with some colleagues the vision of Mosaic, this big expedition that all of you know. And I think we realized from day one when Matt presented this that, YOPP and Mosaic were great matches. And, and I'm really thankful to Matt for continuing to be this link between the two initiatives. And I'm really looking forward to his presentation, but also other presentations, for example, by Gunilla or by Felix Petern, I guess, who will be giving us some first glimpses into the outcomes of this link, like there was this targeted observing period in April 2020 and other activities. But I guess this is still sort of an ongoing story. Now, what was also very important in the beginning was resource mobilization, okay? And we put some numbers here together. And on the left-hand side, this number here of these roughly 2.3 million US dollars, that's something we really got over the 10 or 11 years we got together in order to coordinate and run the project, okay? So we call it here governance and coordination. Now, on the right-hand side, there it's basically what we think and estimate is the third-party funding that was generated by this investment of 2.3 million, and of course the enthusiasm of people. Now, I guess it's very difficult to estimate, and we don't know the number as accurate as the numbers suggest here on the right-hand side. But I think we can be very confident that at least an order of magnitude more was generated in order to do the research that PPP and YOPP set out to enable. Okay. And among this were sort of big EU projects. Actually, the European Commission wrote calls where they asked specifically the community to address and contribute to the year of polar prediction. Or this, this project by Jon Christiansen, alertness. It was a 2.5 million euro project, US dollar project. That was 100% a contribution to the year of polar prediction. And then user engagement, which was largely organized by our PPP Sierra group, and many of them you will get to know over the next couple of days if you don't know them already. And I don't want to go into too much detail. I want to leave the space really to them. But I would like to highlight one cool graphic from the booklet, and that is sort of a schematic. And again, probably you can't see the details, but you have there on the left-hand side, the effort of generating, information. That's sort of the level of water here in the tank up there, and then that's brought to the stakeholders on the right-hand side. And then there are sort of issues with people being drowned by information, while others not being able to reach it at all. And I think this really nicely illustrates sort of the need and and the requirement for properly engaging and interacting with users. But much more will be presented and discussed in the forthcoming days. I would also like to briefly highlight this blog, Polar Prediction Matters, where I think in total we discussed 21 subjects with users and producers of forecasts. And you're invited to visit that website. And currently we are working with WMO in turning this into a WMO book. Okay, so just to secure the legacy here. Now, when it comes to publications, and in the booklet you will see this. We tried always when it comes to assess YOPP, to say, well, let's look at this at a quantitative way, and then sort of in a more qualitative way, sort of telling stories, success stories. Okay. Now, sort of from the publication side, I think we do have a sort of a decent turnout. Something like in excess of 200 publications. Some of them actually quite high impact, and given that the research is still going on and some important papers still need to be written, that is something a number that is going to increase. Okay, and perhaps I should also mention that in total we had something like 5 special issues, including one on societal and research applications as well. Now, one of the key sort of accomplishments and activities were these special observing periods and the targeted observing periods. And the idea was, to enhance the observing system as much as possible during certain periods in order to use then the data to assess the impact that an enhanced observing system may have in order to guide the development of the system for enhanced polar predictive capacity. Okay. And, there will be actually a dedicated talk within this session given by François Massonnet. And, I don't want to, show too many results here, but I think, it can really be said that we succeeded in this. And in total, we had 2 special observing periods in the Arctic. We had 1 special observing period in the Antarctic. We had 1 targeted observing period in the Arctic, sort of, focusing more on sort of certain interesting weather events. And we had 1 in the Antarctic that is finishing, I guess, as we speak. And David Bromwich will, I'm sure, give us an update on this. And in total, we launched quite a few extra sondes. There were additional buoys, including the eastern part of the Arctic that is usually void of buoys, and I think that's a cool thing. And importantly as well, I think sort of on the numerical experimentation side, I think there was a beautiful set of coordinated observing system experiments where sort of in different global forecasting models, the same type of observations were denied, and then the sensitivity to the forecasting system could be quantified. And, even more so, there were also regional experiments, and even there, it was done in a very clean way. And we'll be seeing results at the summit, where basically they took even, as a forcing the global model that denied the same observations as the one denied in the limited area model. And we will be hearing a presentation on this, I believe, during this week. Now, one of the things, I guess, which was a bit surprising, perhaps, that emerged also from these experiments, sort of a bit as a byproduct, but also for some related experiment using nudging, was some insight into sort of teleconnections from a prediction perspective. And on the left-hand side, you see sort of the climatological picture, and it really shows that in this corridor, on average, east of Greenland, so mid-latitude, mid-latitudes drive the evolution of weather and the coupled system in the Arctic. And there are these blue arrows, that's basically where, the information, comes out of the Arctic. And I think that's very interesting and also sort of a very, very, very important knowledge. Now, I guess what is also quite interesting that this actually average picture may be quite misleading, as, worked out by papers by Johnny Day and others. I think that what we are seeing here is sort of certain episodes where this link is actually quite strong. And this is, when the jet stream is strongly meandering. And these are then periods where, this influence of mid-latitude on the Arctic and the Arctic on the mid-latitude, it's there at the same time. Okay, these things live together. And, the explanation is really this elongation of the jet stream. And yeah, I mean, I think what we see is sort of this inflow here into the Arctic. It's a region where, air mass transformation takes place. There's interaction with topography. So, I mean, lots of cool and exciting processes, but also certainly, a lot of things that can, lead to growth of errors and so forth. And I wonder sometimes whether some of the dynamics may actually be of interest also for understanding, these linkages on longer climate timescales. I mean, on the model development side, I would briefly highlight the model intercomparison and improvement project. So I think it reminds you of the MIPS that we are, are well aware of, sort of. But here, I guess it's a little bit putting the bar a bit higher, okay, by saying we don't just want to intercompare, but we also want to improve. And there are sort of cool elements to this, and you will learn more about this week. I just want to highlight one, which is YOPP Sitemap, and which is a little bit like a software infrastructure project. And sort of the idea is really to improve the uptake of data. And the problem is really, when people want to do science, then the data, say, from observational archives, from super sites, they are in all kind of formats, and they are different in formats from, the model data being available. And, this is complicated together. And, if things are complicated, people tend to shy away from doing this. But these thorough comparison on native meshes at the highest possible resolution for all parameters available I think is absolutely critical to assess our models and also provide guidance for future development, with the goal, the ultimate goal of understanding and better describing the processes and their representation in models that matter and that we are very well aware of. Now, I guess an ultimate measure of success if science would have led into operational implementation. And I took the liberty to quote Jung here, who sort of wrote that from his perspective, the main benefit from PPP and YOPP is that Rome Arctic, so their regional configuration at Med Norway, has become an operational short-range weather prediction model for the European Arctic. And without PPP YOPP, a Rome Arctic would not have happened. And I guess the contribution is both. I mean, I guess sort of putting the spotlight on the theme, but also I think being able to generate third-party funding were probably critical in that regard. I mean, also at other centers, I think ECMWF, I think they are still working on implementing changes to their surface model, especially the treatment of snow that leads to quite some benefits in operation. And they're also, I think people considering, how to improve the uptake of microwaves during summertime, which actually from these observing system experiment turned out to be a major issue. So they're very nice microwave satellite data, but the systems are not good enough to make use of them, and that's of course prohibitive. And you want to solve this. And I guess we are going to see sort of more of these science to operations in the months and years to come. That brings me to the communication and outreach bit, and I think this has been probably also one of the biggest successes, and driven by I think the enthusiasm and excellence in that area of Kirsten Werner. And here are some numbers, quantitative indicators, if you will. So we looked a little bit on how many people have visited our PPP website, and the number is in excess of 90,000. And if you look at sort of the number of Twitter followers and so forth, the tweets which have substance, okay, I think that's fair to say, then I think these are all very, very, very solid number. But in terms of this is going beyond quantitative and looking sort of at perhaps more tangible success stories, I think the Polar Predict newsletter is certainly one worth mentioning. And if you haven't seen them already yet, then please look at them. I mean, they contain lots of interesting information about YOPP and what has happened during the last few years. And in total, we published 19. It had to stop when Kirsten left a few months ago, and when she took up the leadership of a press office at one of the major German universities. And there are also interesting pieces of art actually in there. This is here a drawing, that relates to mosaic, but there are also cool drawings from Thomas Racco and others. So I think it's really worth checking those out. And another highlight, I guess, on the communication and outreach part is the iSpot. So, it's about, as I said, polar science, and the people, the first one being more focused on mosaic, and the second one sort of more on polar environmental services. And I think it's astonishing that we have seen, more than 11,000 downloads of the iSpot, and it has been rated in the top 30 Apple podcasts for Earth Sciences in Germany, Great Britain, Canada, and Australia. So I think, the communication and outreach part was certainly successful, and I guess that really contributed also to to the success of YOPP and the buy-in of people. I mean, you also, when you want to consider buying into an initiative, you want to see how much life is there in sort of, is it good or is it not good? And I think the communication and outreach part in that regard was just critical. Now, this is the YOPP Final Summit, but of course it doesn't mean that the work is finished. And some of the speakers before me have alluded already to that. Now, and this is all right, and that's the way it is, and it makes perfect sense. I would like to point out, though, that certainly and officially, we are going to extend 2 clusters into 2023. One is the YOPP Southern Hemisphere part, led by David Bromwich, and the main purpose is the analysis and the write-up of the results from the targeted observing periods that just took place in southern winter. And then we also have this model intercomparison improvement project cluster, where Gunilla, Tanneil, and others will be looking in further creation and curation of these, model and observation files in these sort of same format, and using them in order to look at this from a mosaic perspective. Loading this up bringing this up onto the data portal, and then doing cool science, to understand processes and improve models. And with this, to retain some time for discussion, I stop here, and I'm happy to take questions.
Are there questions?
Thanks very much, Thomas. Rick Tolman, University of Alaska Fairbanks. I may make the point on your very excellent presentation here. Certainly, by the 1990s, at least in parts of the Arctic, it was apparent to indigenous peoples that the Arctic was already changing, and hence the well-known quote from Mabel Tooley, Savunga on St. Lawrence Island, Alaska, that the Earth is faster now, and the name of a well-known book that was published in 2001. So while the pace of change has accelerated, the change in impactful sense to northern indigenous communities is much older. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick. I think that's a very, very, very useful comment. Thank you.
Hello, Thomas. This is David here. I'd like to ask you a what-if question. Going back to the beginning of PPP and YOPP, what would you have done differently?
Usually that's a question I ask in exams, so PhD defenses. So I should be prepared. But to be honest with you, not much. I mean, I think we did the right we did the right thing. I think we got the right people. I think we were there, with the right topic at the right time. So I wouldn't really do anything really different. That may sound a little bit strange, but no, I don't think there will be a major change. I would consider that thing. But I think it's a good question, and perhaps that's a question. It's not just that I should consider, and perhaps that's something we could actually put in the blog and put it out there for people to comment on. Perhaps, although if I may, just sort of a brief thing. I mean, of course, I don't want to say that everything went perfectly well, and I think we have certain gaps. So for example, when it comes to the satellite component, I guess to a certain degree, we could have probably done better. I mean, we made use and we evaluated the impact of satellite observations, and I think we did a very good job at that. But perhaps trying also sort of novel type of satellite systems in general, perhaps even sort of looking a little bit into novel parts of the Earth observing system. I think this could have been something that one might have put a bit more emphasis on. At the same time, this could also be then something that could be a focus on whatever is a follow-on activity resulting here from PPP and YOPP.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question.
Hi, Thomas. It's Ian Grenfrew here. You've almost answered the question I was about to ask, which is, if you were to give advice to the next chair of PCAP or the steering group of PCAP, what would your top tips be?
Yeah, I mean, I think what it takes is a very good topic, and I personally, and I guess to some degree the steering group, we were handed a very timely topic. You were handed it over by Gilbert and others. Okay, but so this was a good topic that was just, you know, needed to be addressed at that time when we started. That was very important. I think we also got the right people together, you know, in the steering group, and they were willing to put in quite a bit of time, you know, because I think it's always a bit like a hen and egg issue, you know. I mean, of course, then you want to get, you know, if you have a project, you want to get funding from, you know, from funding agencies, and you want to get, you know, contributions to the trust fund. But of course, before people do that, they want to see and get a feeling whether you know, things have a chance of flying. So that needs a certain investment. You know, you have to invest your time, and I guess that's something that, you know, people also need to keep in mind. So, you know, it needs a bit of, you know, endurance, and you know, you shouldn't be giving up too quickly. But, you know, defining a topic very well, then, you know, getting the right people on board, giving them also some freedom into shaping this. Okay. Now, I think we are providing advice here to the people, and then I would really say, you know, this group that's picking up whatever will be following, I think they can take this as an advice, but, you know, they have to love it, and they have really to be enthusiastic about moving this forward. So, you know, leaving them to a certain degree the freedom to shape all this. I think that's very important. And then, you know, if there is, you know, support by a coordination office, if there is some support that's needed through the trust fund, and, you know, if people collectively also, you know, through WM and others, work with the funding agencies, you know, like the European Commission, in order to, you know, bring this into calls, I think then you have, you know, all the ingredients. But I think it takes an enormous amount of time and investment, and really people have to have fun, and they must like doing what they are doing.